The crystal chandeliers sparkled above the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, casting dancing shadows across marble floors that had witnessed decades of high society gatherings. Maria Rodriguez wiped down the last table in the corner, her black uniform crisp despite the long evening shift. At 28 years old, she had worked as a waitress at this prestigious establishment for nearly 3 years, serving champagne to people who never looked her in the eye. Tonight was different, though. The hotel was hosting its annual charity gala, an event that attracted the wealthiest families from across the state. Business moguls, politicians, doctors, and lawyers filled every table. Their designer gowns and tailored suits probably cost more than Maria earned in 6 months. She moved quietly between tables, refilling water glasses and clearing empty plates, invisible to the conversations happening around her. Maria had learned to tune out most of what she heard. The elite spoke freely in front of service staff, as if they were furniture rather than people with ears and minds. Tonight, she caught fragments of discussion about stock markets, vacation homes in Europe, and complaints about taxes. One woman loudly proclaimed that poor people simply didn't work hard enough, while her husband nodded along, never having worked a day of manual labor in his life. The young waitress bit her tongue and continued her duties. She thought about her own life, living in a small apartment with her mother and younger brother. Her father had passed away 5 years ago, leaving them with medical bills that still haunted their finances. Maria worked double shifts whenever possible, not just at the hotel, but also at a coffee shop on weekday mornings. Her dreams of finishing college had been put on hold indefinitely. As the dinner service concluded, the hotel manager, Mr. Patterson, took the stage. He was a stiff man in his 50s, who rarely smiled and treated the staff with cold efficiency. He tapped the microphone and cleared his throat, waiting for the crowd to quiet down. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening for such an important cause," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "As you know, tonight's proceeds will benefit the Children's Music Education Fund. We believe every child deserves access to the arts." Maria found the irony sharp. These people would donate thousands tonight, receive their tax deductions and social praise, then forget about underprivileged children until next year's gala. Meanwhile, her brother Miguel had begged for piano lessons for years, but they simply couldn't afford them. "And now," Mr. Patterson continued, "we have a special treat. The renowned concert pianist, Dmitry Volkov, will perform for us this evening." Applause erupted throughout the ballroom. Maria knew of Volkov. He was famous internationally, and his tickets sold for hundreds of dollars. The grand piano at the center of the stage gleamed under spotlights, a beautiful instrument that probably cost more than most people's cars. But then Mr. Patterson's face changed. He touched his earpiece, listening to something, and his expression fell. He leaned into the microphone again. "I apologize, but I've just received word that Mr. Volkov's flight has been delayed due to weather. He won't be able to make it this evening." Quote, disappointed murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests started gathering their things, preparing to leave early. The entire evening's main attraction had just vanished, and Mr. Patterson looked panicked. The hotel's reputation was on the line. "Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you could just wait 1 moment," he said, desperation creeping into his professional tone. "We're working on an alternative." Maria continued clearing tables near the stage, trying to stay out of the way of the growing chaos. She could see Mr. Patterson arguing with his assistant managers, all of them frantically making phone calls. The beautiful piano sat abandoned, a promise unfulfilled. As she reached for an empty champagne glass, her hand accidentally brushed the edge of a table, sending a fork clattering to the floor. The sound echoed in a momentary pocket of silence, and several nearby guests turned to look at her with annoyed expressions. Maria quickly bent down to retrieve it, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. That was when she saw it. The piano, from her low angle, looked different somehow. Less intimidating. More like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Memories flooded back suddenly and powerfully. She was 7 years old again, sitting beside her father at their old upright piano in their previous home. his patient hands guiding hers across the keys, teaching her to read music, to feel the rhythm in her heart. Her father had been a music teacher at a public school, and he had filled their home with melodies. Piano had been their special bond. Even after they lost their house and had to sell the piano to pay bills, Maria had never forgotten. She would sometimes go to the music store downtown and ask if she could try the display keyboards, playing for just a few minutes before the staff asked her to leave. It had been years since she'd touched a real piano, but her fingers still remembered. Late at night, she would practice on a silent keyboard, her fingers moving through complicated pieces while wearing headphones that her brother had given her for her birthday. It was her secret escape, her private dream that she'd long ago accepted would never become reality. Now, standing in this ballroom full of wealthy strangers, she stared at that magnificent grand piano. An impossible thought entered her mind, so ridiculous that she almost laughed out loud. She quickly pushed it away and went back to collecting dishes. But the thought wouldn't leave. It grew louder, more insistent. Her heart began to pound. What if? The question echoed in her mind. What if she could play? What if she could save this evening? What if, just once, she could show these people that talent and worth weren't determined by bank accounts and designer labels? Maria glanced at Mr. Patterson, who was now visibly sweating despite the air conditioning. The guests were becoming restless, some already heading toward the exits. The charity event was falling apart, and with it, the funds meant for children's music education. Her hands trembled as she set down her tray. This was insane. She was a waitress. These people would laugh at her. Or worse, she would humiliate herself. But something deeper than fear was stirring inside her, something that had been sleeping for too long. It was the memory of her father's voice, telling her that music was a gift meant to be shared, not hidden away. Maria's legs felt like jelly as she walked toward the stage. Each step seemed to take forever, and yet she arrived too quickly. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, but her feet kept moving forward. She could feel eyes turning toward her, curious and confused. A waitress approaching the stage wasn't part of the program. Mr. Patterson was still on his phone, his back to the audience, when Maria climbed the first step. His assistant manager, Jennifer, noticed her first. Her eyes widened with alarm, and she quickly stepped forward to intercept Maria. "What are you doing?" Jennifer whispered urgently, grabbing Maria's arm. "You can't be up here. Get back to work. I can play," Maria said quietly, her voice barely steady. "The piano. I can play it." Jennifer's expression shifted from alarm to disbelief, then to something like pity. "Maria, this isn't the time for jokes. Please go back to your station before Mr. Patterson sees you, and you lose your job." But Mr. Patterson had already noticed the commotion. He turned, his face reddening when he saw Maria standing on his stage in her waitress uniform. He stormed over, anger replacing his earlier panic. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice low but fierce. "Get down from here immediately. This is completely inappropriate." "I can play the piano," Maria repeated, louder this time. Her voice didn't shake, which surprised her. "I know this looks strange, but I can do it. I can play for them." Mr. Patterson's jaw clenched. "This is a joke, right? You're a waitress. These people paid thousands of dollars to hear a world-class performer, not some staff member who probably took lessons at the mall. Get off my stage before I fire you right now." The words stung, but Maria stood her ground. She could hear the murmuring growing in the audience. Some people were laughing, others looked scandalized. One man in the front row said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Is this some kind of dinner theater? Is she going to juggle plates next?" His table erupted in laughter. Maria felt heat rising to her face, but she kept her eyes on Mr. Patterson. "Please, just give me 1 minute. If I can't play, I'll leave immediately, and you can fire me." "This is absurd," Mr. Patterson said. But there was a flicker of calculation in his eyes. The guests were leaving. The charity would get no donations. The hotel's reputation would suffer. He was desperate, even if he hated to admit it. Before he could respond, a voice rang out from the audience. "Oh, let the girl try." It was an elderly woman in the third row, dripping in pearls and diamonds. Maria recognized her as Mrs. Catherine Thornwood, one of the city's oldest and wealthiest families. What harm could it do? She certainly can't make the evening any worse than it already is. And if she fails, well, at least we'll have a story to tell at next week's garden party. The crowd chuckled, and several other guests called out their agreement. They were bored and ready to leave anyway. At least this promised entertainment, even if it was the cruel kind. Mr. Patterson looked trapped. Finally, he threw up his hands. "Fine. One song. One. And when this disaster is over, Maria, clear out your locker." He stepped back, gesturing angrily at the piano. Maria walked to the beautiful instrument on shaking legs. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, most of them expecting her to fail, some hoping for it. The piano bench was exactly the right height. She sat down carefully, her hands hovering over the keys. The ivory felt cool and smooth under her fingertips. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. This was real. This was actually happening. She closed her eyes and thought of her father. She thought of all those late nights practicing on her silent keyboard. She thought of every dream she'd pushed down, every time she'd told herself that people like her didn't get chances like this. Then she began to play. She started with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Op. 9, No. 2. It was one of the first complex pieces her father had taught her, and she knew it by heart. Her fingers moved across the keys, tentative at first, then growing stronger. The opening notes floated through the ballroom, soft and melancholic. The murmuring stopped. The laughter died away. In the sudden silence, only the piano spoke. Maria's fingers gained confidence, dancing across the keys with increasing fluidity. She had played this piece 1,000 times in her imagination, but actually hearing it, feeling the vibration of the strings, was overwhelming. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she kept playing. The music swelled and fell, tender and passionate by turns. Maria forgot about the audience. She forgot about Mr. Patterson's anger and the guests' mockery. She forgot about being a waitress, about unpaid bills and double shifts. In this moment, she was simply someone playing piano, doing the thing she loved most in the world. Her fingers moved through the intricate passages with precision. The emotion poured out of her. Years of frustration and hope and grief for her father channeling through the keys. The piano responded beautifully, its rich tones filling every corner of the vast room. As she played, Maria became dimly aware that something had changed in the atmosphere. The energy in the room felt different, charged somehow. But she didn't look up. She couldn't. The music had taken over completely, and she was just the vessel through which it flowed. She transitioned into the middle section, where the melody grows more complex, more urgent. Her hands crossed and recrossed, her fingers finding every note with certainty. This was muscle memory from a lifetime ago, combined with years of silent practice. It all came together now, when it mattered most. As the piece approached its conclusion, Maria allowed herself to feel the full weight of the moment. This might be the only time she ever played for an audience. Tomorrow, she would be back to being invisible, if she even still had a job. But tonight, right now, she was a pianist. She was her father's daughter. She was exactly who she was meant to be. The final notes rang out, soft and fading, like a whisper disappearing into the night. She held the silence for a breath. Then, too, the way her father had taught her. "Let the music settle," he used to say. "Let it complete its journey." Then she opened her eyes and lifted her hands from the piano. The silence that followed was absolute. Maria sat frozen at the piano bench, suddenly terrified to turn around. Had she been terrible? Had she embarrassed herself completely? The quiet stretched on for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only seconds. Then the applause began. It started with one person, then two. Then suddenly the entire ballroom erupted into thunderous clapping. Maria turned slowly, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. The guests were on their feet, giving her a standing ovation. Their faces showed shock, amazement, and something that looked like respect. Mrs. Thornwood was clapping enthusiastically, a genuine smile on her face. The man who had joked about juggling plates looked stunned, his mouth slightly open. Even the people who had been heading for the exits had stopped and turned back, drawn by the music. Maria stood up from the bench, her legs weak. She didn't know what to do with her hands. Should she bow? That seemed presumptuous. She was still just a waitress in a wrinkled uniform. But the applause continued, washing over her like a wave. Mr. Patterson stood at the side of the stage, his face a mixture of emotions that Maria couldn't quite read. Shock, certainly. Perhaps embarrassment that he had so thoroughly underestimated her. His assistant, Jennifer's, mouth hung open, in disbelief. More, play something else. Someone called from the audience, and others quickly echoed the request. The energy in the room had completely transformed. These people who had been ready to leave disappointed were now eager to stay. Maria looked at Mr. Patterson, silently asking permission. He seemed to struggle with himself for a moment, then gave a stiff nod. His expression said this conversation wasn't over. But for now, the guests wanted music. And the guests were always right. She returned to the piano bench, her heart still racing. What should she play next? Something different, she decided. Something that showed range. She chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece that was both technically challenging and emotionally evocative. As her fingers touched the keys again, the room fell silent instantly. This time, the silence was one of anticipation, rather than mockery. She began the opening notes, that distinctive ascending melody that sounds like moonlight feels. The piece flowed from her hands like water, each phrase blending into the next. Debussy's impressionistic style required a delicate touch, a sense of color and atmosphere. Maria had always loved this piece for its dreamlike quality, the way it could transport a listener to another world. She played with her eyes closed, feeling every nuance. The music rose and fell, sometimes barely a whisper, sometimes swelling with emotion. She could sense the audience listening intently, caught up in the spell of the piece. When she finished, the applause came again, even louder this time. Maria opened her eyes and saw that several people in the front rows were actually crying. Mrs. Thornwood was wiping her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s stood up from his table near the front. Maria recognized him vaguely from magazines and local news. Alexander Chen, a tech billionaire who had made his fortune in software and now ran one of the largest investment firms in the region. He walked toward the stage, and the room quieted to hear what he would say. "Young lady, that was extraordinary," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Where did you study?" "Juilliard? Curtis?" Maria felt her face flush. "I didn't go to any music school, sir. My father taught me when I was young. He was a music teacher. After he passed away, I practiced on my own." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mr. Chen looked even more impressed. "You're self-taught? That's remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. What's your name?" "Maria Rodriguez, sir." "Well, Maria Rodriguez, you've given us an unexpected gift tonight. I'd like to make a personal donation to the Children's Music Education Fund in your honor. $50,000. $50,000. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Maria couldn't even process that amount of money. It was more than she made in a year, maybe 2 years. But Mr. Chen wasn't finished. "And I'd like to propose something. This charity is meant to help children access music education. But what about talented adults who never got their chance? Maria, would you be interested in scholarship opportunities? I know several conservatory directors personally." Maria's mind reeled. Was this real? Was this actually happening? She opened her mouth but couldn't find words. Before she could answer, another guest stood up. It was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a well-known philanthropist and patron of the arts. I'll match Alexander's donation and add my own offer. Maria, I sit on the board of the City Symphony Orchestra. We have an opening for a second pianist. It doesn't pay as much as, well, as this crowd might expect. But it's a real position. A professional opportunity. Now Maria's eyes were filling with tears. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to maintain composure. More guests were standing now, calling out donations, offering contacts and opportunities. The charity coordinator, a woman who had been sitting quietly taking notes all evening, looked overwhelmed as she tried to keep track of the pledges flooding in. In a matter of minutes, the donations had surpassed anything the event had raised in its entire history. Maria looked out at all these faces. These wealthy strangers who minutes ago had seen her as invisible, as less than them. Now they were looking at her as an equal, maybe even with admiration. It was disorienting and overwhelming and wonderful. But then she caught sight of her fellow waitstaff, standing along the walls where they had been throughout the evening. Her co-workers Marcus, Lisa, and Svetlana watched with wide eyes. They looked happy for her, but also sad somehow. And she understood why. They were still invisible. The magic spotlight that had found Maria hadn't touched them. How many other talented people worked in this hotel? How many brilliant minds served coffee or cleaned rooms, their potential unseen and unappreciated? Maria had been lucky tonight. Incredibly lucky. But luck shouldn't be the determining factor in whether someone's gifts were recognized. Mrs. Thornwood stood up, raising her champagne glass. I propose a toast to Maria, and to the reminder that talent and worth can be found in the most unexpected places. Perhaps we should all look more carefully at the people around us, rather than just through them. There was a moment of uncomfortable shifting among some guests who understood the gentle rebuke in her words. But glasses were raised, and the toast was made. Mr. Patterson finally stepped forward, his expression complicated. He clearly hadn't expected his waitress to become the star of the evening, and he seemed uncertain how to handle the situation. But he was also a businessman, and he could see that Maria had just saved his event and possibly enhanced his hotel's reputation in the process. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patterson announced, his professional smile back in place despite the strain visible around his eyes. It seems we've discovered something quite special tonight. Maria, on behalf of the Riverside Hotel, I want to thank you for your remarkable performance. It wasn't quite an apology for his earlier harshness, but it was something. Maria nodded, accepting it for what it was. She understood that Mr. Patterson was a man who cared deeply about appearances and reputation. Right now, appearing grateful to the woman who saved his event was the smart play, even if he still felt threatened by the disruption to his ordered world. As the applause finally began to fade, a young woman approached the stage. She looked to be in her early 30s, dressed in an elegant navy suit that spoke of professional success. Her expression was intense, focused. Miss Rodriguez, my name is Amanda Price. I'm a music journalist for the Tribune, she said, pulling out a business card. I'd love to interview you for a feature story. What you did tonight? Who you are? This is news. This is the kind of story people need to hear. Maria took the card with trembling fingers. A feature story? In the Tribune? That was the city's largest newspaper. Her mother would be so proud, but also worried. Maria could already hear her voice warning about too much attention, about getting hopes up too high. I also run a YouTube channel about classical music, Amanda continued. If you're comfortable with it, I'd love to record you playing and share it with a wider audience. You have real talent, Maria. People should know about you. Before Maria could respond, several other guests crowded forward, all wanting to talk to her, to offer something. A piano teacher offered free lessons. A concert hall manager suggested she could use their space to practice. A recording studio owner proposed making a demo album. The offers came so fast that Maria's head spun trying to keep track of them all. Through the crowd, she caught Marcus's eye. Her fellow waiter smiled at her, but then he tapped his watch and gestured toward the kitchen. Right. There were still tables to clear, dishes to collect. The gala wasn't over just because she had stopped being invisible for a moment. Maria politely excused herself from the crowd of well-wishers and stepped down from the stage. She picked up her abandoned serving tray and went back to work, even as guests tried to stop her to talk more. It felt surreal, clearing champagne glasses while people who had ignored her an hour ago now wanted her attention. That was incredible, Lisa whispered, as they passed each other near the kitchen door. Lisa was a single mother of 2 who worked 3 jobs. You showed them, Maria. You really showed them. But as Maria worked, she noticed something that bothered her. Some of the guests, the ones who had been most dismissive earlier, were now telling stories as if they had recognized her talent all along. The man who joked about juggling was now loudly proclaiming that he had sensed something special about her from the moment she walked on stage. Others were already turning the evening into anecdotes for their social circles, casting themselves as the enlightened ones who appreciated hidden talent. Mrs. Thornwood, however, remained genuine. She found Maria during a quiet moment and spoke to her privately. My dear, what you did tonight took tremendous courage, but courage alone won't sustain a music career. Talent needs nurturing, and nurturing needs resources. Here is my personal number. Call me next week, and we'll discuss how to help you properly train and develop your gift. Thank you, Mrs. Thornwood. I don't know what to say. The elderly woman smiled warmly. Say yes to the opportunities that come your way. And remember, tonight happened because you took a risk. Keep taking them. The world needs people who are brave enough to step out of the shadows. As the evening finally wound down and guests began to leave, Mr. Patterson called Maria into his office. She entered nervously, unsure if she was about to be fired despite everything that had happened. His office was immaculate, filled with awards and photos of him with various celebrities and politicians. He sat behind his large desk, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Finally, he sighed. Maria, what you did tonight was completely against protocol. You left your station, interrupted an event, and put me in a very difficult position. Her heart sank. Here it came, the firing she had been expecting. However, he continued, you also saved the evening, and brought more positive attention to this hotel than any marketing campaign ever could. My phone has already been ringing with people wanting to know about you, asking if you'll perform at their events. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I'm not going to fire you, but I can't have you working as a regular waitress anymore either. It would look ridiculous, given what everyone now knows about your abilities. So, here's my offer. You'll become our official pianist. You'll perform in the hotel lounge Thursday through Saturday evenings. The pay will be better than what you make as a waitress, though not by much. Take it or leave it. It wasn't a generous offer. Maria suspected that, as a pianist, she could command much higher rates elsewhere, especially after tonight. But it was steady employment, something she desperately needed. The other opportunities people had mentioned were exciting but uncertain. Nothing was guaranteed. I'll take it, she said. But I need to give notice at my other job, and I'd like to keep working some waitress shifts until the pianist position starts. My family needs the income. Mr. Patterson nodded curtly. Fine. You start as pianist next month. That gives you time to prepare a proper repertoire. He paused, then added with something almost like respect. You're quite talented. Maria? I won't pretend I understand how you got so good practicing in secret, but you earned what happened tonight. Don't let it go to your head, but don't sell yourself short either. It was probably the closest to a compliment she would ever get from him. Maria thanked him and left his office. her mind reeling from how completely her life had changed in just a few hours. When she finally finished her shift and changed out of her uniform, it was nearly midnight. She stepped out of the hotel's employee entrance into the cool night air. Exhausted, but too wired to feel it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, who had heard about what happened through a friend whose daughter worked in the hotel kitchen. The message was full of excited capital letters and exclamation points and prayer emojis. Maria smiled and texted back, promising to explain everything when she got home. As she walked toward the bus stop, she pulled out the business cards people had given her tonight. Amanda Price's card was on top. A feature story. A YouTube video. Real recognition for her talent. But along with the excitement came fear. What if this was just a moment? What if the attention faded, and she went back to being invisible? What if she wasn't good enough to compete with people who had trained at prestigious schools? Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Music is a gift meant to be shared, not hidden away. He had believed in her talent even when she was just a child making mistakes. He would have been so proud of what she did tonight. The bus ride home felt different than usual. Maria normally used this time to decompress from her shift, her body aching and her mind numb from hours of taking orders and avoiding complaints. Tonight, she couldn't sit still. Her fingers kept moving unconsciously, practicing invisible keys on her lap, replaying the pieces she had performed. When she finally arrived at her apartment building, she found her mother waiting up despite the late hour. Rosa Rodriguez stood at the stove making hot chocolate, her traditional response to any major life event, good or bad. Her eyes were red, and Maria realized her mother had been crying. "Mija," Rosa said, pulling Maria into a tight embrace. "Everyone is calling me. Everyone is talking about what you did." Mrs. Hernandez from church saw it herself. She said you played like an angel. Her younger brother Miguel came running out of his room, still in his pajamas despite being 15 and usually too cool to show much emotion. "Maria, you're famous. It's already on social media. Someone posted a video, and it has like 5,000 views already." Maria's stomach flipped. She hadn't even thought about people recording her performance on their phones. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. The idea of thousands of strangers watching her, judging her, was terrifying. Miguel showed her his phone, and there she was, a somewhat grainy video of her playing Chopin. The comments section was filling up rapidly. Most were positive, expressing amazement at her talent and her story. But there were negative ones too. Some people questioned whether she was really self-taught. Others made cruel comments about her appearance or her uniform. A few suggested the whole thing was staged for publicity. "Don't read those," Rosa said firmly, taking the phone from Miguel. "People who hide behind screens and say mean things are cowards. What matters is what you did tonight. Your father would be so proud. Tonight, what is a blind's not a fiver man." Rosa Pontsev. At the mention of their father, both Maria and Miguel fell quiet. It had been 5 years, but the loss still felt fresh sometimes. He had been the one who filled their home with music, who taught Maria to hear the emotion behind the notes, who insisted that art was just as important as any practical skill. "I wish he could have seen it," Maria said softly. "He did see it," Rosa insisted, touching her daughter's cheek. "I know he did. This is what he always wanted for you. He knew you were special." They sat together drinking hot chocolate, and Maria told them everything. The fear before walking onto the stage, the feeling of the keys under her fingers, the stunned silence followed by applause. She told them about the offers, about Mr. Patterson's new position, about the possibility of scholarships and real training. Miguel listened with wide eyes. "Does this mean we're going to be rich?" Maria laughed. But Rosa shook her head gently. "No, mijo. It means your sister has a chance, a real chance, to do what she loves. But chances aren't guarantees. She'll have to work very hard." Maria squeezed her mother's hand. Rosa understood. She had worked 2 jobs herself since Maria's father died, cleaning houses and working in a laundry facility. She knew the difference between opportunity and certainty, between hope and foolishness. "I'm going to keep my morning shifts at the coffee shop for now," Maria said. "Just until I'm sure about everything. We can't risk the steady income." Rosa nodded approvingly. She had raised her children to be practical, even while encouraging their dreams. It was a delicate balance, hoping for better while preparing for disappointment. That night, Maria lay in bed unable to sleep. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications. Friend requests from people she didn't know, messages from former classmates who hadn't spoken to her in years, suddenly interested in reconnecting, organizations asking her to play at their events. The attention was overwhelming. She thought about the other waitstaff at the hotel, people like Marcus and Lisa and Svetlana. They had talents too. Dreams too. Marcus wrote poetry. Lisa painted beautiful watercolors when she had time, which was almost never. Svetlana spoke 5 languages fluently. But nobody would discover them tonight. Nobody would offer them scholarships or feature stories. Maria had been lucky. Lucky that the pianist canceled. Lucky that Mr. Patterson was desperate enough to let her try. Lucky that she had chosen to play pieces that moved the audience. But so much of life was luck. Being in the right place at the right time. It didn't seem fair. The next morning, Maria went to her shift at the coffee shop, determined to maintain some normalcy. But word had already spread there too. Her coworker Jake had seen the video, and their manager Carlos had gotten calls from customers asking if it was true that the woman in the video worked there. "You're like a celebrity now," Jake said, impressed. "That's so cool." But being treated like a celebrity at a coffee shop meant something different than at a fancy hotel. Here, customers who normally barked orders and complained about wait times suddenly wanted to talk to her, to hear the story directly, to feel connected to someone they had seen online. It was exhausting in a different way. One customer, a middle-aged man in a business suit, recognized her and spent 10 minutes telling her about his own talent that nobody appreciated. He had been good at chess as a child, but never pursued it. Maria listened politely, but she could see the line of irritated customers growing behind him. Amanda Price, the journalist, called that afternoon. They set up an interview for later in the week. Amanda explained that she wanted to do a comprehensive piece, not just about Maria's performance, but about her life, her background, the larger issues of class and opportunity that her story highlighted. "People love stories like yours," Amanda said. "The underdog, the hidden talent revealed. But I want to dig deeper if you're willing. I want to talk about why talents like yours stay hidden, about who gets opportunities and who doesn't." Maria appreciated that approach. She didn't want to be just a feel-good story, forgotten a week later. If her moment in the spotlight could mean something larger, that felt worthwhile. Over the next few days, Maria's life became a whirlwind of interviews, meetings, and decisions. Mr. Chen followed through on his offer, connecting her with the admissions director at a prestigious conservatory. They offered her a partial scholarship for their adult learners program, which would let her study on evenings and weekends while still working. Dr. Mitchell's offer to audition for the symphony orchestra position was real too. The audition was scheduled for 2 weeks away. Maria would have to prepare 3 contrasting pieces to perform for a panel of musicians. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Mrs. Thornwood invited Maria to lunch at an expensive restaurant, the kind with 3 forks at each place setting. Maria had to look up dining etiquette videos the night before to avoid embarrassing herself. Over delicate salads and food Maria couldn't quite identify. Mrs. Thornwood laid out a plan. "You have raw talent, my dear. But talent alone isn't enough at the professional level," she explained. "You need technical refinement, performance experience, and industry connections. I can help with all of that. But you have to be willing to work harder than you've ever worked in your life." I've worked 3 jobs," Maria said quietly. "I know hard work." Mrs. Thornwood smiled. "Physical hard work, yes. But this is different. This is exposing yourself to constant criticism and judgment. Every performance, every note, will be evaluated by people who trained for years at elite schools. Some will resent you for not taking the traditional path. Others will assume you're not as serious because you came from service work. You'll have to prove yourself over and over again. Maria met her eyes steadily. I'm ready for that. The following weeks tested Maria in ways she hadn't anticipated. Mrs. Thornwood arranged for her to study with Professor Elena Vasquez, a renowned piano instructor who had trained several concert pianists. The first lesson was humbling. Professor Vasquez was a severe woman in her 70s, elegant and precise in every movement. She listened to Maria play through one of her pieces, her face revealing nothing. When Maria finished, she expected some praise, some acknowledgement of the talent everyone had celebrated at the gala. Instead, Professor Vasquez said simply, "You have natural musicality and feeling, which cannot be taught. Everything else needs work. Your technique has gaps. Your interpretation is instinctive, but inconsistent. We have much to do." For the next 2 hours, Professor Vasquez broke down Maria's playing, pointing out flaws in her posture, her hand position, her pedaling. Things that hadn't mattered when she played alone late at night suddenly became crucial. Maria left that first lesson feeling smaller than she had in years. "Don't be discouraged," Mrs. Thornwood told her afterward. "Elena is harsh, but she's the best. She wouldn't waste her time if she didn't think you had real potential." But potential and achievement are different things. Maria threw herself into practice with desperate intensity. She would work her coffee shop shift in the morning, practice for 3 hours in the afternoon at a practice room the conservatory let her use, take her lesson with Professor Vasquez, then go to the hotel for evening shifts. She barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination. Miguel worried about her. "You look tired all the time," he said one evening. "When do you rest?" "I'll rest when I'm dead," Maria joked, but the look on her brother's face told her it wasn't funny. She was burning herself out, and everyone could see it, except her. The video of her performance continued to spread online. It had been picked up by several news outlets and now had over 1 million views. Strangers recognized her on the street. Some were kind, offering encouragement. Others felt entitled to her time and attention, offended if she was too busy to talk. A few musicians online criticized her, suggesting she was overhyped, that her story was more interesting than her actual talent. Those comments stung more than she wanted to admit. They echoed her own deepest fears. Amanda's feature story came out in the Sunday Tribune, spreading across 3 full pages with photos. The headline read, "From Waitress to Wonder: How One Woman's Courage Challenged Our Assumptions About Talent and Class." The article was thoughtful and well written. Amanda had interviewed not just Maria but also other hotel staff, classical music experts, and sociologists who studied barriers to arts education. She framed Maria's story as part of a larger conversation about who gets opportunities and why. But the article also brought unwanted attention. Conservative commentators latched onto it as an example of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, twisting Maria's story to argue against social programs and support for the arts. Progressive activists criticized the narrative for making poverty seem noble or for suggesting individual talent was the solution to systemic inequality. Maria found herself at the center of debates she never wanted to be part of. People on both sides used her story to support their existing beliefs, rarely asking what she actually thought or experienced. The audition for the symphony orchestra position arrived faster than Maria felt ready for. She had prepared 3 pieces as required: a Bach prelude and fugue, a Beethoven sonata movement, and a contemporary piece by a living composer. Professor Vasquez had drilled her relentlessly on every measure. The day of the audition, Maria's hands shook as she sat in the waiting room with 5 other candidates. They were all younger than her, fresh from prestigious music schools, their resumes impressive and intimidating. She heard them talking about their training, dropping names of famous teachers and competitions they had won. One of them, a young man with perfect hair and expensive clothes, glanced at Maria and asked, "Are you auditioning too? Where did you study?" "I didn't go to a conservatory," Maria admitted. "I'm mostly self-taught." His polite smile became condescending. "Oh, you're that waitress everyone's talking about. How interesting. Well, good luck to you. I'm sure it's been a wonderful experience for you to get this far." The dismissal in his tone was clear. He had already decided she wasn't real competition. Part of Maria wanted to be angry, but mostly she felt the crushing weight of doubt. What was she doing here? These people had trained their entire lives for this. She had worked double shifts and practiced in stolen moments. When her turn came, Maria walked onto the stage to face the panel of 4 judges. They sat behind a long table, their expressions neutral and professional. Dr. Mitchell was among them, but she showed no favoritism, treating Maria exactly like any other candidate. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Rodriguez," the panel chair said. Maria sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and took 3 deep breaths the way Professor Vasquez had taught her. "Let the nervousness fuel your performance, not paralyze it," she heard her teacher's voice in her head. She began with the Bach, her fingers moving through the intricate counterpoint. This piece was technical, mathematical almost, requiring precision more than emotion. She had practiced it hundreds of times, but performing under judgment was different. About halfway through, she made a small mistake, her fingers slipping for just a fraction of a second. Her heart lurched. Should she stop and start over? No. Professor Vasquez had been clear. In performance, you keep going. You recover. She pushed through, regaining her focus, and finished the piece cleanly. The judges made notes, their faces revealing nothing. Maria moved on to the Beethoven, a piece she connected with more emotionally. This was where her natural musicality could shine. She poured herself into it, letting the passion of the music carry her past her anxiety. As she played, something shifted. She stopped thinking about the judges, about the other candidates, about proving herself. She just played, the way she had alone in her apartment, the way she had at the gala when music was all that mattered. The final piece, a contemporary work full of unusual rhythms and dissonances, was her riskiest choice. Not everyone appreciated modern classical music, but Maria had fallen in love with this piece, with its complexity and its refusal to be easily categorized. She played it with commitment and conviction. When she finished, she sat for a moment in the ringing silence, then stood and bowed. The judges thanked her politely, giving no indication of how she had done. She left the stage with no idea whether she had succeeded or failed. In the hallway afterward, Dr. Mitchell caught up with her. "I can't tell you how you did compared to the others. That wouldn't be appropriate. But I will say this. You've grown tremendously in a very short time. Whatever happens, you should be proud of yourself." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. Maria thanked her and left the building, emotionally exhausted. That evening, she had her first official performance as the hotel pianist. Mr. Patterson had promoted the event, and the lounge was packed with people who had heard about her story and wanted to see her play. Some were genuine music lovers. Others were curiosity seekers, wanting to say they had seen the famous Waitress pianist. Maria wore a simple black dress that Mrs. Thornwood had bought her, appropriate for performing but not ostentatious. As she sat at the piano in the hotel lounge, she noticed many familiar faces. Marcus and Lisa and other staff members had come to support her, sitting at tables they would normally be serving. Mr. Chen was there with business associates. Mrs. Thornwood had brought friends. Even Amanda Price had come with her camera, ready to capture this new chapter. But Maria also noticed new faces, young people who looked like they might be students or struggling artists themselves. They watched her with a particular intensity, as if her success or failure mattered to their own dreams. Maria began her set with a Schubert impromptu, a piece that was both technically accomplished and emotionally accessible. As her fingers moved across the keys, She felt the familiar comfort of the music wrapping around her. This was different from the audition. Different even from the gala. This was her job now. She was being paid to do what she loved most in the world. The thought was almost overwhelming. How many people got to say that? How many people spent their lives doing work that drained them, that they tolerated just to survive? She had been one of them just weeks ago. And might be again if things didn't work out. But right now, in this moment, she was a professional pianist. She played for 2 hours with a short intermission, moving through a carefully selected program that ranged from Baroque to contemporary. She included the Chopin Nocturne that had started everything. And when she played it, she could feel the recognition in the room. People leaning forward to hear the piece that had gone viral. During the intermission, people approached to talk with her, to take photos, to tell her how inspiring she was. Maria tried to be gracious. But she was learning that this attention was exhausting in its own way. Everyone wanted a piece of her story, wanted to feel connected to her success. A young woman, probably around 20, waited patiently until the others had dispersed. She looked nervous, clutching a worn notebook to her chest. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm sorry to bother you," she said quietly. "My name is Jennifer Chen. I'm a student at the community college. I write poetry, and I've been trying to get published for 2 years. But nobody will even read my work because I don't have the right connections or education. When I saw what you did, it gave me hope that maybe talent matters more than pedigree." Maria looked at this young woman and saw herself. Saw everyone who had a gift, but not the circumstances to develop it properly. "It's both," Maria said honestly. "Talent matters, but so do connections and education and luck. I got lucky that night, but I also worked for years in secret, practicing when I could. Don't wait for a lucky moment. Keep working. Keep submitting your poetry. Make your own luck when you can." Jennifer nodded, tears in her eyes, and thanked her before moving away. The interaction left Maria feeling the weight of what her story meant to others. She wasn't just playing piano anymore. She had become a symbol. And that was both powerful and frightening. The second half of her performance went smoothly, and as she played her final piece, a beautiful Brahms intermezzo, she felt a sense of completeness. This was where she was supposed to be. All the struggles, all the sacrifices, they had led to this. The applause was warm and genuine. Patterson approached afterward, actually smiling for once. "Well done, Maria. We've already had inquiries about booking you for private events. This is very good for the hotel's image." Always about image and business with him. But Maria was learning to accept people's limitations. Mr. Patterson would never see her as more than an asset to his hotel, and that was okay. She didn't need his approval or his friendship. She needed his paycheck and the platform he was providing. 3 days later, Maria received 2 phone calls that would determine her immediate future. The first was from Dr. Mitchell. "Maria, the panel has made its decision. We'd like to offer you the position as second pianist with the symphony orchestra. The vote wasn't unanimous, I'll be honest. Some felt you needed more traditional training. But your performance was strong, and I argued that your unique perspective and natural musicality would bring something valuable to the orchestra. The final decision is yours." Maria thanked her, her heart racing. A position with the symphony orchestra. It was everything she had hoped for. Validation that she belonged in the professional, classical music world. The second call came an hour later from Professor Vasquez. "Maria, I have been asked to serve as artist in residence at the Beijing Conservatory next year. They have offered me the opportunity to bring one advanced student. I would like that student to be you. It would mean a year in China, intensive training, and performing opportunities. It would also mean giving up other commitments." Maria felt dizzy. 2 incredible opportunities, but they conflicted. The symphony position required her to be here, to perform regularly with the orchestra. The conservatory opportunity meant leaving for a year, postponing the symphony role, possibly losing it entirely. How long do I have to decide? Maria asked. For my offer, 1 week. The symphony. You should ask them directly. After the calls ended, Maria sat in stunned silence. This was the kind of problem she never imagined having. Too many good options instead of none. She called her mother, who listened carefully to the situation. What does your heart tell you, Mija? Rosa asked. My heart wants both. The symphony is stable. It's here. I can help support you and Miguel. But the training in Beijing, that's a chance to really develop my skills, to learn from the best. It's the kind of opportunity that might never come again. Then you know what you have to do. Rosa said gently. Take the training. The symphony will still be here in a year. Or there will be other orchestras. But your father always said you should learn everything you can while you're young enough to absorb it. We'll manage. We always have. Maria knew her mother was right. But the decision felt selfish. Her family needed her income. Miguel was applying to colleges next year and would need financial support. Could she really leave them for a year to chase her own dreams? She talked to Miguel that evening, explaining the choice she faced. Her brother listened seriously. No longer the carefree kid, but growing into a thoughtful young man. Maria, you've been taking care of us since Dad died, he said. You worked 2 jobs, 3 jobs, so I could stay in school. So Mom didn't have to work herself to death. It's time for you to do something for yourself. I can get a part-time job. Mom and I will figure it out. Take the opportunity. Don't sacrifice yourself for us again. His words broke something open in Maria. She had been the family's support for so long, she had forgotten she was allowed to have her own dreams, her own path. The guilt didn't disappear entirely, but it loosened its grip. After several sleepless nights and long discussions with Mrs. Thornwood, Professor Vasquez, and her family, Maria made her decision. She would go to Beijing. She called Dr. Mitchell to explain, asking if the symphony position might be available when she returned. I can't promise anything, Dr. Mitchell said. If there's an opening when you return, you'll be a more competitive candidate. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was honest. Maria appreciated that. The months before her departure flew by in a blur of preparation. She continued performing at the hotel, building her repertoire and her confidence. The initial wave of media attention faded, which was almost a relief. She was no longer the waitress who played piano in every headline. She was becoming simply a pianist, which was all she had ever really wanted. Amanda's YouTube channel posting of Maria's performance had reached over 5 million views. The comments section had become a community of sorts, people sharing their own stories of hidden talents and deferred dreams. Some reported being inspired to pick up instruments they had abandoned. Others talked about taking risks to pursue creative careers. Maria read through them sometimes, humbled by the impact of one evening's courage. The night before her flight to Beijing, the hotel threw a farewell performance. The ballroom was full again. Many of the same people who had been there for the gala. Mrs. Thornwood gave a short speech about talent and opportunity and the importance of investing in artists. Maria played a program of pieces that meant something to her personal journey. She ended with a piece her father had composed, a simple but beautiful melody he had written for her when she was 10 years old. She had found the sheet music in his old things while packing for her trip. As she played her father's music, she felt his presence more strongly than she had in years. He had given her this gift, taught her to hear the world in harmonies and rhythms. Everything that was happening now stemmed from his patient lessons, his belief in her potential. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Rosa and Miguel sat in the front row, proud and sad and hopeful, all at once. Her friends from the hotel staff were there, Marcus and Lisa and Svetlana and others, representing the world she was leaving behind but would never forget. After the performance, Maria stood in the ballroom that had changed her life, saying goodbye to people who had become important to her. Mr. Chen promised to stay in touch, offering to help connect her with opportunities when she returned. Mrs. Thornwood embraced her warmly, telling her to be brave and work hard. Professor Vasquez, showing rare emotion, squeezed Maria's hand. "You have surprised me, Maria Rodriguez. When we started, I saw raw talent, but little discipline. Now I see an artist with the dedication to match her gift. Do not waste this opportunity in Beijing. Learn everything you can." Gym time. As the evening ended, and people slowly departed, Maria took one last moment alone at the piano. She played a few soft chords, remembering the night she had walked up to this instrument as a waitress. Terrified, but determined. That night had been about courage, about taking a risk when it mattered most. But Maria understood now that courage wasn't just one dramatic moment. It was the decision to keep going every day, to work hard even when exhausted, to believe in yourself even when others doubted. She thought about Jennifer Chen, the young poet who had approached her. She thought about all the other talented people working invisible jobs. Their gifts, unrecognized. Her success wouldn't change the system that kept so many struggling. But maybe her story would inspire a few more people to take their own risks, to refuse to stay hidden. Maria Rodriguez left the hotel that night not as a waitress or as a viral sensation, but as a pianist with a future full of possibility. She didn't know what would happen in Beijing, or whether she would return to find opportunities or obstacles. But she knew she had earned her place in the world of music through talent, determination, and one night of extraordinary courage. The piano sat silent in the empty ballroom, waiting for the next person brave enough to play it. And somewhere in the city, other hidden talents were practicing in secret, preparing for their own moment to step into the light.